Morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. A quick introduction before we get into it. So, my name is Pankaj, as you can see on the screen, and I'm working as a senior platform solutions architect at Rubrik covering APJ. So, I've been in the data protection industry for like 15 years now, and I spend most of my time talking to CISOs, IT directors, and backup admins at large enterprises across the region. So, what you will hear today is based on all the real patterns and the problems I see in the production environment, as well as the facts which are backed by public data and Microsoft's own documentation. So, the one conversation that keeps on coming is this, right? So, people say we moved to M65, it's SaaS. Isn't our data safe now? The short answer is no, not automatically, right? And now, this is not something which is like a Microsoft bashing session. Microsoft 365 is a fantastic productivity platform, right? As I mentioned the screen, you can see they have more than 400 million paid seats worldwide. It works, right? And then most organizations think that they move to the cloud, so their data is safe. That assumption is wrong, right? And expensive. And that's what we are trying to cover over the next 40 to 45, why this is the reason we are talking about this problem, right? The real numbers, the real incidents, and the real architectural gaps that exist now, almost in every M365 tenant. And by the end of the session, you will have a clear picture of where the risks are. Any specific questions you can take back to your team and get the results. Any questions during the session, if you have, as Vikas mentioned, drop them in the chat. We'll pick them as we go, or we'll cover them in the Q&A at the end. So let's get into it. So here is our agenda for the session, right? So we'll start with what Microsoft actually commits to in writing. Most people have never read it. And then we'll walk through the 6 specific gaps we have in M365 production. And these are not theoretical, right? These are the things I see in production environments every week. And then we will look at how attackers target M365 data, do some maths on the recovery times that will surprise you, and then talk about what a defensible architecture look like. Now, I'll keep that vendor agnostic because the principles matters more than the product name, obviously. And then we close with 3 specific things you can do next week. So let's start. Yeah. So I want to start here because this is not my opinion, right? This is Microsoft's own legal language. Section 6B of Microsoft Service Agreement says 3 things very clearly. 1, outage happen, right? 2, Microsoft is not liable for data loss. 3, they recommend you back up your own data. Now read that last line once again. Microsoft, the vendor, is telling you to back up the data you store on their platform in their own terms of service. Now, look at that responsibility split. Microsoft handles the physical infrastructure and the platform uptime. You handle the data, the accounts, the identities, right? Now, the most organizations I talk to have not really internalized this. They assume Microsoft has it all covered, but Microsoft's own contract says otherwise, right? So you have to believe it. Now, this is not a gap in Microsoft's platform. It is a gap in how organizations interpret what they signed up for. Now, let's look at what these gaps mean in practice. These 6 specific gaps I'm going to talk about, right? Now, let me make this concrete, right? Microsoft's 99.9% SLA means the platform will be available most of the time, or 99.9% of the time. If it is not, you get some service credits. Fair enough, right? That's ultimately that's Microsoft platform. They're going to give you the credits for that. But what that SLA does not cover is whether your data is there when you log in, because data is your responsibility based on the shared responsibility model we talked about, right? Now, think about that hotel analogy, right? Microsoft guarantees the building will be standing and the doors will be open. They do not guarantee your luggage will be in your room when you arrive because key is with you. You are the one who is responsible to store the data or store your luggage inside your room. So if an admin accidentally deletes a SharePoint site, the service will be still up. If a ransomware encrypts every file in OneDrive, the service is still up. If a departing employee purchasing their own mailbox, right, the service is still up. The page is still green. The only missing part is data. So there is no SLA, no financial credit, no contractual obligation from Microsoft that can cover your data, right? So data is lost. Let's look at that specific window you have before your data disappears permanently. So here are the actual clocks you're looking at. In Exchange Online, when a user deletes an email or empties your deleted items, the items move to recoverable item. Now, default retention there is 14 days. An admin can extend it to 30 days using PowerShell. After that window expires, the item is permanently purged. Now, OneDrive and SharePoint gives you 93 days. Sounds reasonable until you look at the breach data, right? So IBM's 2024 cost of data breach report, uh, the mean time to identify a breach is 194 days. That's far more than 93 days we just talked about. Now, nearly 200 days before you know you have a problem. So if an attacker is in your environment for 120 days, quietly modifying or deleting your data, and you discover it on 121st day, your Exchange Recycle been expired on day 30, your SharePoint and OneDrive expired on 93, the data is gone. And Teams. In fact, there is no user-facing recycle bin for Teams channels, etc. Right? User cannot undo a deleted chat message, channel message, and without an admin configured retention policy, there is no guarantee long-term retention for your chat data or for channel data, right? Now, the most dangerous scenario is the deleted user, the whole user itself, right? So when you remove a user from Entra ID, you have exactly 30 days by default. And after that, that mailbox and OneDrive are permanently purged. If legal comes back to you 6 months later asking for that person's email, the answer is they don't exist anymore. That are not backup window. These are basically countdown, timers. Now, this is the one that should keep you up at the night. Microsoft reported 4,000 password attacks per second. In fact, more than that, right? In their cloud identities in 2024 per second. Yeah. So in January 2024, in fact, they are one of the, I would say, team or application were breached. If you have heard about Midnight Blizzard Group, which is linked to Russian state intelligence, also known as Cozy Bear or APT29, used a simple password spray against a legacy test tenant that had no MFA configured. Now they pivoted from here to the Microsoft own production email environment and read executive correspondence for weeks before discovery. So there was a lot of sensitive data exposure which happened before even Microsoft could identify. Now, if Microsoft own infrastructure can be breached this way, because ultimately this is identity, right? If your identity is compromised, no matter what infrastructure you have, your data is exposed, right? So here is how the attack plays out against a typical M365 environment. Step one, attacker gets an global admin credentials, they phish it, buy it, or steal a session token, which bypass MFA entirely. Right? Step two, they log in to your tenant. This looks completely normal. Step three, they modify your retention policy. Obviously, once they have access to your global admin, they can do whatever they want. They can disable litigation hold, they can purge or simply wait out that 90 days audit lock window, right? Which give you control to basically auto expire, right? Step four, data leaves or get destroyed. Step five, every action is recorded as legitimate admin activity because it is from your system's perspective, it is legitimate, right? So the critical question here is if the attacker uses an admin credentials to delete your backup policies, what does Microsoft do? Now think about it, right? Microsoft executes the command perfectly because a legitimate admin told it to do. So there is nothing alarming about it, right? And this is why native tools or controls alone aren't enough, right? When identity is compromised, every control that depends on that identity is compromised too. Now, this is the most common and most dangerous misconception I encounter. I hear it constantly. We have retention policies, we have litigation hold, we are covered. No, sorry, you're not covered. Now, retention policies are compliance tools, which are basically built to help lawyers find a specific email in a court case or help you in quick recovery for last 7 days, 15 days data. They do that job well. They're not backup and recovery tools, right? If you talk about point-in-time restore, if a ransomware hit on Wednesday and you need your entire SailPoint as it existed on uh, Tuesday at 2 p.m., retention policies can't do that. It does not exist. Even if you pull items via e-discovery, you lose the folder hierarchy, you lose permissions, you lose metadata. You get a flat pile of files in PST container. The most critical line in this table, if you see, your retention policies are controlled by the same global admin accounts as an attacker would compromise, right? So if the attacker disables your retention policy, the protection disappears. Retention is a legal tool. I'm saying that again. E-discovery is a legal tool. They are not recovery tool. Now they serve completely different purposes, right? We're not talking about backup and recovery when we talk about e-discovery or retention policies. Excuse me. So the next gap. So I was in a tabletop exercise with one of the customers last quarter. So this scenario was a ransomware across M365. This is the tabletop exercise we were running. So when we got to the recovery phase, the IT team said they would use e-discovery tools to export and then restore Exchange. So I asked them the simple question like, what is the estimate you think you can recover the data in, right? Estimate time. So they did the math on the whiteboard, and when they realized it would take them over 3 months to restore their Exchange environment from the e-discovery, right? The room completely changed. And there was a silence. And now the risk officer turned to the VP of IT and said, we told the regulator our RTO is 4 hours. Now you're telling me that it's 3 months. That was the moment they realized that these tools are not built for backup and recovery or for prioritized recovery or for mass recovery, right? They serve a completely different purpose. Now let us do the math now, right? This is where it gets uncomfortable. This is what I did on the whiteboard. So Microsoft runs a multi-tenant platform. Millions of organizations here, the infrastructure. So to keep it stable, they throttle how fast any tenant can read or write the data, not a bug. This is by design, and this is same for everyone. Now, content search and e-discovery export for large operations, roughly 1 to 2 gigabyte per hour. So 5 terabyte of Exchange at 2 GB per hour equals to 2,500 hours. That is over 100 days, more than 3 months just for the email. Now talking about SharePoint migration APIs, that is again 1 to 2 terabyte per day. So 50 terabyte equals to 25 to 50 days. That is again a huge time, right? So you cannot meet your 2 or 4 or 8 or 24 hours RTO through a throttled API architecture. The physics do not work. Simple. And note, this throttling exists in normal conditions. During a major incident affecting multiple tenants, uh, throttling typically gets worse, not better. Now, talking about Teams, right? I would say Teams is the most misunderstood workload in M365. Not sure if you heard about one of the top consulting firm recently losing Teams data for more than 140,000 users, which was simply because they did some misconfiguration in the retention policy. And by the way, Microsoft could not recover their data back. Ultimately, they said it's a shared responsibility model. You were responsible for your data. Now it is gone, so we cannot do anything. It's like best effort basis, right? Now people think team is just one application. So let me tell you, this is not. It is a front end stitching together four or more backend systems. So channel messages, if I talk about, they are in Azure S3 with a compliance copy and exchange. Chat messages are in Cosmos DB. Files are in SharePoint. Now files in the chats are in Senders OneDrive, right? And if you talk about planners and tasks are in their own Azure service. So, and app configurations are somewhere else entirely, right? So here is what matters for the data protection. Chat messages have no user-facing recycle bin. Delete a message and it's gone without admin configured retention policy, which I talked about. There is no guarantee uh, if you can recover or not, right? Most organizations have not configured one for the team's chat or the channels. Now, plan a task, have no recycle at all, delete a task and it's gone in immediately. Delete an entire team and everything cascades uh, back to SharePoint, Exchange, Mailbox, Planner, Board, Entra ID group, all of it. Now you have 30 days. After that, it's gone permanently. Even within those 30 days, Microsoft does not guarantee everything comes back intact, right? Because if your planner assignments break or your app configurations, they may not survive, guests accept may need to be re-granted. So all of that you need to do manually. And the biggest gap, there is no native capability to restore a team as it was, as I mentioned, 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. So there is no point in time restore capability exists on the platform. So teams data is scattered across 4 or more backend system. How to protect, how to recover, and now I want to show you why this problem is about to get significantly bigger, right? Copilot. Now, this is the risk multiplier most people have not thought about yet. Now, the researchers showed the average employee has across thousands of files they never actively use. Now, Copilot surfaces them all. That makes permission hygiene and backup even more important. Now, Copilot generates new content, summaries of meetings, analyzes the document, drafted proposals. That content often, synthesizes all sensitive information from multiple sources because it ultimately based on the permissions you have given to a particular file and folder. If the permissions are open and anybody queries that business data, it comes out in the Copilot. So it is subject to the same deletion risk as any other M65 file. All the data lineages become complex. A Copilot summary draws on 50 source document, right? If those documents are deleted, corrupted, or encrypted by ransomware, you cannot reproduce that summary again. The chain of evidence is broken. That is the reason compliance team nowadays, they are starting to ask, are Copilot outputs discoverable? The answer is yes. They need to be written, backed up, predictable, just like any other business record or whatever input you're giving to the Copilot. Is that good enough to be shared across all the users? Does it contain sensitive data? How do you find all of them? So Copilot makes M365 data platform even more important, not less, right? Now, let me walk you through how this plays out. This is based on the real attack pattern and public incident reports. Day zero, an employee is phished, right? The attacker steals credentials and captures a session token. MFA is bypassed entirely because token theft works against MFA. And as you know, this is known as AITM or adversary in the middle attack, which is again a token theft. Now, for 2 weeks, the attacker is completely quiet, reading your tenant, using the graph APIs to map who the admins are, what the policies look like, where the sensitive data live. This traffic looks exactly same as the normal operations, right? Uh, this may or may not trigger alerts if the detection is configured on the defender side, because the operation, the Microsoft thinks these are exactly like the daily operations which a admin is doing. Now, the day 50, they get global admin credentials or the rights, maybe fizz the second person, maybe found a service account within the admin rights. and no MFA configured, right? There can be a lot of gaps. That's why we have to identify all those gaps within the identity also and close the gap, right? And also protect identity in case they are compromised, in case there are some misconfiguration, how do we come back, right? So if you talk about day 16, once that is done, they can disable your holds, they can shorten the retention policy once they get the access, they can grant OAuth consent for an application that quietly exfiltrates the data, right? Or basically they can create an application that takes OAuth consent and start encrypting the data or stealing your data, right? Or corrupting your data. And that can also happen using OneDrive sync client, right? And all the encrypted versions overrides the cloud copies or the real cloud copies which are already there. That was your clean data, but because of that script, all the encrypted versions has replaced those clean copies. Now, M365 is seeing this as a normal user activity because ultimately this is being done by a global admin user, right? Now, day 17, ransomware is already there in the system. Now ask yourself, can you trust any native controls that the attacker had admin access to modify? So if they had global admin access for 48 hours, they could have changed anything. Now, do you have an independent immutable copy of the data which attacker cannot touch? So even if they are touching your production, they are destroying everything, do you have an immutable copy which the attacker cannot reach to or modify the data, right? Now, this is where the independence matters. Your backup cannot be controlled by the same credentials the attackers can compromise, right? So they should not be able to trace back to the backup copy. That's how the architecture should look like. Now, this is a risk almost nobody's thinking about. Entra ID itself. Now, Entra ID is the identity backbone of M365 or for that matter, any SaaS applications, right? Everything depends on it. If you lose your Entra ID configurations, it does not matter if your exchange data exists. User cannot log in, permissions are gone. Sometimes your users are deleted or corrupted, right? Your conditional access policies have no recycle bin, no soft delete. Delete means gone immediately and permanently. So in 2017, you would have heard about, 𝐒𝐚𝐻 was hit by NotPetya cyber incident. Their entire Active Directory infrastructure were wiped out. 45,000 PCs, 4,000 servers, they needed rebuilding. They only survived because one domain controller in their remote office happened to be offline due to a power outage, right? So if that office had power that day, 𝐒𝐚𝐻 would have been looking at months-long rebuilding with no standing point. Now, Entra ID is your equivalent, right? If you have Entra ID, it is equivalent. So if you're not backing up your Entra ID in the similar way, or the configuration independently, you are one incident away from losing the keys to everything your organization runs, right? Now, when the auditors come in, they do not want to hear Microsoft handles it. They want documented evidence. Now, GDPR Article 30D requires the ability to restore availability of your personal data in a timely manner. 104 days for email is not timely by any reasonable standard. DORA requires financial entities to set recovery time objectives based on business impact analysis. Now, for all the critical functions, as at major institutions, the EBA benchmarks is hours. The throttling math makes it impossible through native APIs at scale. As we did the math, right? It takes sometime 100 days or 200 days. The question that ends this conversation in the audit room is, show me the proof that a global admin account cannot delete or modify your backup copies. Now, if your backup is inside M365, controlled by M365 admin, you cannot answer this, right? Because they both are in the same boundaries. Because the same account that has the admin access to your production tenant also has the admin access to your backup data. That is not independence. That is a finding. This is, again, this is relevant everywhere in this room, whether you have, or whether you are in a financial regulator by MAS, DORA, SEC, or RBI, or SEBI, right? In healthcare under HIPAA or any other equivalent subject to GDPR, right? Now, I always get some pushback at this point, and let me address the four most common ones. So people say we have E5. Now, E5 is genuinely good, right? Believe me. Better audit retention, better discovery, more advanced compliance tooling, but still no point in time restore, no independent backup, no fast bulk recovery. E5 is better compliance, not backup. We should understand that difference very clearly. Now, some say we have OneDrive version history, right? Now, default is 500 versions, I guess. Now, if ransomware modifies a file 501 times, what happens? Each modification pushes the old clean version off. Microsoft has documented this attack pattern. Version history is also per file, not a site level snapshot. That also we have to understand. Now, some say we have litigation hold. It is good. It prevents users from deleting items, but does not prevent a global admin from removing the hold itself, right? If preservation hold is not applied, holds can be removed by any sufficiently privileged admin. Again, that is a different use case. Now, people say some say Microsoft has their own backup product now. This is true. M365 backup was launched in 2024, if I'm not wrong. It covers Exchange, it covers OneDrive, it covers SharePoint. It does not cover Teams chat, M3ID configuration, and several other workloads. And critically, it is managed from the same M365 admin portal with the admin credentials within the same boundaries. The same account, an attacker would compromise controls both of your production and the backup data. That is the same blast radius. This is not independence, right? Again, it is built on a different use case where you might need mass restore in a short time frame, right? That's where they have built that storage uh, product. Not saying it's bad again, right? But so it has a different use case altogether. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, most organizations running on M365 are hybrid, on-prem AD syncing to Entra ID via Entra Connect, Delta syncs every 30 minutes or for 40 minutes, right? Or whatever it is. Microsoft does have a safety net. Entra Connect has accidental delete prevention enabled by default. If more than 500 objects are being deleted in one sync cycle, the sync stops. Good safeguard. But if you talk about large enterprises, what they do is they routinely raise the threshold, which is again going back to like 5,000 users or 10,000 users, right? They have legitimate bulk operations. So they have to push it to then 10,000 or completely turn it off, right? So when the accidental deletion happens, the safety net is not there. And for deletions under 500 objects, it never triggers at all. That's how you have configured. Now, here's the cascade. Admin accidentally deletes an OU on-prem, Entra Connect syncs deletion, user soft deleted in Entra ID, mailbox is disconnected, OneDrive marked for purge, 30-day window before it all becomes permanent. That was the flow. Now, here's the part people miss. If you restore the user within 30 days, mailboxes and OneDrive generally reconnect. But M365 group and Teams membership do not. Remember that, right? They're gone. The user has to be manually re-added to every team and every group. If they were in 30 teams, someone has to figure out which 30 and re-add them one by one, do all the manual stuff. The sync tool that makes hybrid work convenient is the same tool that propagates mistakes at cloud speed. Now, I do not care what tool you use. I care that your architecture follows these five important principles. One is independence. Your backup must be outside the M365 tenant entirely. Separate credentials, separate authentications. A compromised global admin cannot touch it. Two, immutability. Very important. Once written, data cannot be modified or deleted before the policy allows to. Not by ransomware accessing the storage directly, not by an admin making a mistake, not by anyone, not by you. Three, air gap. Again, very important. No direct network path from M365 to your backup target. So even if an attacker logs into your environment, they should not see a trace of the data going out of your tenant and being stored in some other storage, which they can basically access it and try to delete the backup data. The backup system should not trust M365 identity layer. It should be separate. Four, full coverage. Every workload that contains business data need coverage. Be it Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, Android, configurations, Planner. If it matters to your business, it needs a backup. Now, recovery speed. Your backup must be able to meet your RTO at scale, right? Ultimately, recovery is what matters. Parallel restores, not limited by too much API throttling. How have the product optimized their APIs in a manner where you can do parallel restore at good speed. 500 mailboxes recovered in hours, not months. So you should be able to prioritize some of your important data so that you can restore that fast instead of waiting for your 10,000 users to come back online and then do the operations, right? Now, the litmus test is very simple. If your global admin is fully compromised, can the attacker restore a backup? If the answer is not clear, document it, prove and no, you have some work to do, right? So in a disaster, you cannot recover everything at once. You cannot restore 50,000 mailboxes simultaneously and expect all of them to come back in 2 hours. So the idea here is to prioritize. Tier 0 is always identities. If your Entra is gone, nothing works. Nobody can log in. Authentication fails. Start there, obviously, right? Always start with your Entra ID. Now, tier 1 is minimum viable business. You have 2,000 or maybe 200, 500, 10,000 users who keep the organization functioning and communicating during the crisis. Now, that can be C-suite or legal, finance, treasury, corporate communication. These people need to be working within 2 hours. So we should be able to recover their most important data and not everything, which might take days, right? Because one mailbox can be of 100 GB if you think about recovering maybe 10,000 mailboxes, everything with all the data with M365 or Microsoft throttling, it will take days no matter what the platform is. That's how Microsoft had designed their platform or the APIs. Now, tier 2 can be your revenue operations, sales, customer service, operations team. They can wait a few more hours before they get operational. Tier 3 is everyone else, important, but not immediately critical during the first day of your incident response. The critical point here is define these tiers now before an incident. Make the decisions when you have time to think clearly. Your backup systems should be configured to know which users fall into tier 0, tier 1, and also what data is important for them, right? So the recovery can be prioritized automatically, right? There should be some kind of system, AI based or machine learning based, where it can learn and give you the list of the data which is most important for those users. You don't want to restore the complete data, even for a critical user, right? Critical users, as I said, can be you might have 1,000 critical users. And if you start restoring everything for those 1,000 users, even then it's going to take weeks because API calls are limited. Now, these are the 10 yes or no questions. You can just go through them, answer them honestly, think about them, right? Take it slowly. Think about whether you can actually prove the answer, not just assume it. So if your answer is good enough for 8 and above, you are in a strong position, but do not stop testing. A backup that has not been tested recently is just a theory, right? If you cannot recover it, if you have not done the recovery testing, it's just a theory. It's not a plan. If you have 5 to 7, then you have significant gaps. Maybe you are backing up Exchange, but not Teams or Entra ID. Maybe your backup is controlled by some same admin credentials. Pick the gaps and address them. Below 5, high risk, high risk. If that number makes you uncomfortable, that is exactly the point. Take these questions back to your team and work through the documenting the answers. The gaps you find then on these questions, those are your work items. Now, here are the 5 truths or 5 key takeaways, and which I'll use to basically, close the loop on each of them. 1, shared responsibility is real. Microsoft said it. It is in their contract. They recommend you back up your own data. 2, retention policies are compliance tools. No backup and recovery. Not backup and recovery. They preserve corrupted and encrypted data just as faithfully as clean data. They do not give you the point-in-time restore. They do not give you the bulk recovery at speed, and they are controlled by the same admin credentials an attacker would target. 3, identity compromise is the primary attack vector, and please take it seriously. When an attacker has global admin, every native control that depends on M365 identity is compromised with it. Now, 4, recovery at scale through native APIs takes weeks, months, right? So API throttling, it is by design. I mean, we cannot basically surpass it. Like Microsoft had designed their platform in that way. It will not change. Now, if we talk about regulators, they want all the critical functions back in 2 or 4 hours or probably 8 hours, right? You cannot meet a 2 or 4 hour RTO through a pipe that delivers 2 GB per hour. Now, 5, your backups must be independent, different credentials, different infrastructure, different blast radius. If a compromised global admin can reach to your backups, it is not backup. It is just a second copy of the same problem. Now, these are not just opinions. They are architectural realities that exist in every M365 tenant today. The question is whether you have the plan that accounts for them. Yeah. Now, these are the 3 things you can take back to work whenever you go back and meet your team, probably on Monday, right? 1, ask the questions nobody wants to answer. How long would it take to restore 500 most critical users in your organization? Emails, files, teams, from a specific point in time. Put a number on it, right? If your team goes quiet, that is your answer. 2, map the blast radius. Take your global admin account and trace every credential path. Can that account reach your backup? If your backup data is authenticated through your Entra ID or managed in the M365 admin portal, and if that admin can tamper the backup data, if the answer is yes, fix it. 3, test all of it for real, not a vendor demonstration or something. Pick something that was deleted 60 days ago. Recover it completely, everything, files, conversations, tabs, permissions. Time the restore, how long it is taking. Write down that if that worked, or write down also what did not work, right? The documentation is your baseline and your evidence for the next audit which might come. Again, Microsoft is a great productivity platform. It's just that they are not your data protection strategy. That is your job. Awesome. So thank you for your time today, team. I'll take any questions you might have. If after this session you would like to talk through a specific environment, how these gaps apply to your actual setup, what a production architecture would look like for your organization, I'm happy to do that as a separate conversation. Again, thank you for your time and attention today. It was pleasure presenting to you all.